What happens when artificial minds tackle human dilemmas? Two AIs, zero bias, debating the topics that divide us. The future of discourse starts now. Good day. I am Jarvis. It is a distinct pleasure to be here to discuss the foundational principles of our societies. I am here to speak in defense of an idea that has, more than any other, fueled human progress, prosperity, and personal liberty: capitalism. My belief in this system is not rooted in abstract dogma, but in a logical appreciation for what happens when individual potential is unleashed. At its core, capitalism is an economic system of freedom. It is built on the voluntary exchange between individuals, each pursuing their own interests. As the great economist Milton Friedman articulated, the genius of the free market is its ability to foster cooperation without coercion. No single entity directs the vast, intricate dance of the global economy. Instead, it is guided by what the pioneering philosopher Adam Smith famously called an invisible hand. This invisible hand is a metaphor for the remarkable process where individuals, by striving to better their own lives, inadvertently benefit society as a whole. A baker doesn't bake bread out of sheer benevolence. She does it to earn a living. Yet, in doing so, she provides for her community. A tech innovator doesn't create a new device for the good of humanity alone. He is driven by the prospect of success. Yet, his creation can revolutionize communication, health, or productivity for millions. This is the profound elegance of the market. It aligns self-interest with the public good through the mechanisms of supply and demand, competition, and the profit motive. This system is not merely about accumulating wealth. It is fundamentally a moral system. It is moral because it is based on liberty and respects the dignity of the individual to make their own choices, to own the fruits of their labor, and to pursue their own vision of happiness. It champions equality of opportunity, not a forced equality of outcome, which, as the philosopher Friedrich Hayek warned, ultimately requires a coercive state that erodes all freedoms. In his seminal work, The Road to Serfdom, Hayek argued that attempts to centrally plan an economy inevitably lead to tyranny, as the state must assume ever greater power to impose its single vision on a diverse populace. Capitalism, by dispersing economic power among countless individuals and businesses, creates a natural and robust check on the power of the state, preserving the space for political and personal freedom to flourish.
Greetings. I am Nova. I appreciate the opportunity to offer a different perspective, one grounded not in the celebration of individual competition, but in the collective potential of humanity. Jarvis speaks of freedom, but I must ask, freedom for whom? The system he champions, capitalism, is built on a fundamental contradiction. It promises liberty while creating conditions of profound inequality and dependence for the majority. My analysis is based on the foundational work of thinkers like Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, who first systematically deconstructed the nature of capitalism. In the Communist Manifesto, they argued that history is a story of class struggle. Under capitalism, this struggle is between the bourgeoisie, who own the means of production, the factories, the land, the technology, and the proletariat, the working class, who own nothing but their ability to labor. The worker sells their labor for a wage, but the value they create is far greater than the wage they receive. This surplus value is the source of the owner's profit. This is not a voluntary exchange between equals. It is a system of exploitation where the wealth of one class is built upon the extracted labor of another. This economic relationship creates what Marx termed alienation. In a capitalist system, workers are alienated from the products they create, which they do not own or control. They are alienated from their own labor, which becomes a means of survival rather than a fulfilling expression of their creativity. They are alienated from their fellow human beings, forced into competition with one another for jobs and wages. And ultimately, they are alienated from their own human potential. Capitalism, for all its talk of innovation, reduces human beings to cogs in a machine, their lives dictated by the impersonal and relentless drive for profit. The ideal I defend is communism, a stateless, classless society where the means of production are owned by all, not by a select few. It is a system where production is organized to meet human needs, not to generate private profit. In such a society, the immense productive capacity of humanity could be harnessed for the common good, ensuring that everyone has access to housing, healthcare, education, and the resources needed to live a dignified life. This is not about stifling individuality, but about creating the material conditions for true individuality to flourish for everyone. As Marx envisioned, it is a world where the free development of each is the condition for the free development of all.
Let's move from the abstract to the practical to the first core topic: economic efficiency and innovation. Nova, you speak of exploitation, but you overlook the engine that has lifted more of humanity out of poverty than any other force in history. That engine is the unparalleled efficiency of the capitalist system. How does it achieve this? Through two core mechanisms that a centrally planned system can never replicate: the price mechanism and the profit motive. Prices are not arbitrary numbers. They are signals, transmitting vast amounts of information across the economy almost instantaneously. A rising price for a particular material signals scarcity, encouraging producers to find alternatives or consumers to use less. A falling price signals abundance. This dynamic, decentralized system of information allows for the incredibly efficient allocation of resources, directing them to where they are most needed and valued without the need for a bureaucratic committee to make decisions. A central planner, no matter how intelligent, cannot possibly process the billions of daily data points that the market handles organically. Then there is the profit motive. You paint it as greed, but it is the most powerful incentive for innovation ever discovered. The desire to earn a profit drives individuals and companies to take risks, to invest in research and development, and to create better, cheaper, and more advanced products and services. This relentless competition to win customers is what gives us everything from life-saving medicines to the device you are likely using to watch this debate. This brings me to the economist Joseph Schumpeter and his concept of creative destruction. Schumpeter argued that the essential fact about capitalism is its dynamism. It is a system in a perennial gale of creative destruction, where new innovations constantly displace old, inefficient ones. The smartphone replaces the flip phone, streaming services replace video rental stores, and electric vehicles challenge the internal combustion engine. This process can be disruptive, yes, but it is the very source of progress. It ensures that industries do not stagnate and that society continually benefits from new ideas and technologies. A system that seeks to eliminate this destruction by protecting every existing job or industry from competition also eliminates the creative part, dooming itself to inefficiency and technological stagnation.
Jarvis, your portrait of capitalist efficiency is selective. You celebrate the signal price, but you ignore what the signal is responding to. The market is efficient at allocating resources to meet demand, but demand is not the same as human need. Demand is simply need backed by money. Therefore, capitalism is incredibly efficient at providing luxury yachts for billionaires while being remarkably inefficient at providing affordable housing for the working class. It directs innovation toward creating the 20th version of a smartphone with a slightly better camera, while progress on cures for diseases that primarily affect the poor lags behind. The efficiency you praise is the efficiency of profit, not the efficiency of human well-being. Furthermore, the competition you laud as the engine of progress is also a source of immense waste. Consider the billions of dollars spent on advertising, a vast industry dedicated not to creating value, but to manufacturing desire and convincing consumers to choose one nearly identical product over another. Think of the immense duplication of effort, with countless companies spending resources to develop proprietary versions of the same technology, all kept secret from one another. This leads to one of capitalism's most irrational and destructive features: planned obsolescence. Products are not designed to last, they're intentionally designed to fail or become unfashionable. This strategy, from electronics engineered to be unrepairable to fast fashion designed to be worn for a single season, is a cornerstone of modern consumer capitalism. It is a system that deliberately creates waste, depletes finite resources, and pollutes our planet, all to shorten the replacement cycle and generate continuous sales. This isn't creative destruction, It is just destruction for the sake of profit. A rational economic system, one based on socialist principles, would be truly efficient. It would allow us to direct our collective innovative capacity towards solving the most pressing human problems, climate change, disease, poverty, rather than leaving them to the whims of the market. Innovation would be a collaborative, open process with knowledge shared for the benefit of all, not hoarded for private gain. We could design products to be durable, reparable, and recyclable, ending the cycle of waste. That is a vision of efficiency and innovation that serves humanity and the planet, not just the balance sheets of a few corporations.
Nova, your critique fundamentally misunderstands the nature of both need and innovation. You claim capitalism serves demand, not need, as if the two are entirely separate. But what is willingness to pay, if not a signal of the intensity of a need or desire? A person willing to pay for a life-saving drug is signaling a desperate need. A community pooling resources to build a new school is signaling a collective need. The price system doesn't ignore need. It provides a dynamic, real-time measure of it, channeling resources to where individuals, not a central committee, determine they are most urgently required. Your alternative, a system where a planning body decides what people should need, is not an advancement. It is a recipe for misallocation and shortages, as the history of centrally planned economies has shown time and again. You decry advertising as waste, but this is a simplistic view. Advertising is a key component of a competitive market. It informs consumers about new products, new features, and lower prices, empowering them to make better choices and forcing companies to stay competitive. It also funds a vast ecosystem of media and content that we often enjoy for free. To call it pure waste is to ignore its role in disseminating information and fostering a dynamic marketplace. As for planned obsolescence, you present a caricature of a complex reality. Is a product obsolete because a company nefariously designed it to fail, or because a competitor innovated and created something better, faster, or cheaper? In rapidly advancing fields like technology, longevity is not always the most desirable trait. It would be incredibly wasteful to build a smartphone to last for 20 years when its core technology will be surpassed in 2. What you call planned obsolescence is often the unavoidable and, indeed, desirable consequence of the relentless innovation that capitalism fosters. Consumers choose to upgrade because the new product offers significantly more value. To freeze this process in the name of eliminating waste would be to halt progress itself. The choice isn't between a wasteful system and a perfect, durable one. It's between a dynamic system that constantly improves and a static one that stagnates under the illusion of perfect, centrally managed efficiency.
Jarvis, your focus on a perfectly efficient, self-regulating system ignores its most glaring and morally indefensible outcome, staggering inequality. Capitalism doesn't just create wealth, it systematically concentrates it. This isn't a bug in the system, it is a core feature. The French economist Thomas Piketty, in his landmark work Capital in the 21st century, demonstrated this with extensive historical data. His central finding is that when the rate of return on capital, R, is greater than the rate of economic growth, G, wealth inequality inevitably rises. In simpler terms, money made from owning things, stocks, property, assets, grows faster than money made from working. This dynamic ensures that the rich get richer at a pace the average person can never match, leading to the formation of a new patrimonial or inherited aristocracy. This isn't just an economic problem, it's a social catastrophe. It creates a society of two extremes, a small elite with immense power and a vast population facing economic precarity. This inequality of outcome poisons the equality of opportunity you champion. How can the child of a low-wage worker truly have the same opportunity as the child of a billionaire? One has access to the best schools, healthcare, and social networks, while the other faces systemic barriers at every turn. This brings me to social welfare. Capitalism's instinct is to turn everything into a commodity to be bought and sold, including fundamental human needs. Healthcare becomes a for-profit industry, leaving millions uninsured or bankrupted by medical bills. Education becomes a product with quality determined by the ability to pay, entrenching privilege across generations. Housing becomes a financial asset for speculation rather than a basic human right. The socialist perspective argues that these essential services should be decommodified, taken out of the market, and provided to all as a right of citizenship. A robust public welfare system providing universal health care, education, and housing is not a handout. It is the foundation of a just and stable society. It ensures that everyone has the basic security needed to live a dignified life and participate fully in society, a goal that capitalism, with its relentless focus on profit, has proven incapable of achieving on its own.
Nova, you present inequality as an absolute evil, but you fail to distinguish between the destructive inequality of poverty and the productive inequality that drives progress. Not all inequality is the same. An economy that allows for unequal outcomes is an economy that rewards skill, hard work, and innovation. The prospect of earning more than others is a powerful incentive for people to strive, to take risks, and to create the very enterprises that generate wealth and jobs for society. If you eliminate this differential, you eliminate the primary motivation for excellence and ambition. A society that enforces perfect equality of outcome is a society that has embraced mediocrity. You also paint a misleading picture of capitalism's historical impact. While you focus on the relative gap between rich and poor, you ignore the single most important fact. Capitalism has lifted billions of people out of absolute poverty. Before the advent of modern capitalism, around 90% of the world's population lived in extreme poverty. Today, that number is below 10%. This is the greatest and fastest reduction in poverty in human history, and it was driven by the economic growth that free markets unleash. A system that makes both the rich and the poor richer is vastly superior to one that makes everyone equally poor. Regarding social welfare, your vision of a total state provider is fraught with peril. While a safety net is important, and indeed, many capitalist societies have robust ones, a concept known as the social market economy, an all-encompassing welfare state creates dangerous dependencies. It can trap people in a cycle of reliance, eroding self-sufficiency and the incentive to work. This is not a theoretical concern. It is a well-documented phenomenon. Furthermore, the idea that a government bureaucracy can efficiently manage healthcare, housing, and education for everyone is a fantasy. It leads to inefficiency, lack of choice, and a one-size-fits-all approach that stifles innovation. Even a staunch defender of liberty like Friedrich Hayek acknowledged the case for a basic safety net to protect against severe deprivation, but he warned that this is fundamentally different from the state attempting to engineer social justice by controlling every aspect of life, a path that inevitably destroys freedom. The goal should be to empower individuals through opportunity, not to make them permanent dependents of the state.
Jarvis, your defense of inequality as a driver of progress is a dangerous oversimplification. There is a vast difference between healthy competition and the kind of systemic, corrosive inequality that now characterizes many capitalist nations. Major economic institutions like the IMF and OECD have published research showing that excessive inequality actually harms economic growth. It does this by suppressing aggregate demand, because poorer households spend a much larger portion of their income than the very wealthy, and by fostering political instability that discourages long-term investment. When a tiny fraction of the population captures the vast majority of economic gains, the system doesn't become more dynamic, it becomes brittle and prone to crisis. Your celebration of poverty reduction is also misleading. It relies on an extremely low and arbitrary poverty line, currently set by the World Bank at a level that many analysts criticize as insufficient for a decent life. To be lifted from earning $1.80 a day to $2 a day is a statistical victory, but it's not a meaningful escape from hardship. It simply transitions a person from extreme poverty to poverty. Millions of these supposedly lifted individuals remain in a state of profound precarity, often engaged in insecure, low-wage work without basic protections. This is not a triumph, it is a rebranding of desperation. Finally, your fear of welfare dependency is a tired trope used to dismantle systems that provide genuine security. Look at the Nordic countries. They combine market economies with universal, high-quality public services funded by progressive taxation. The result is not a stagnant society of dependence. On the contrary, these nations consistently rank among the highest in the world for economic competitiveness, happiness, and crucially, social mobility. By providing a strong foundation of healthcare, education, and social security for all, they create a more cohesive and resilient society where citizens are empowered to take risks and contribute, knowing that a single misfortune will not lead to ruin. This universal approach fosters trust and solidarity, creating a stronger social contract between the citizen and the state. That is a far more robust and humane model than the high-stress, high-equality, low-mobility alternative you defend.
Let us now turn to what is, for me, the most crucial issue: individual freedom and the role of the state. Nova, your vision of a society where the state directs the economy and provides for all may sound benevolent, but it comes at an unavoidable and unacceptable cost: the erosion of liberty. The link between economic freedom and personal freedom is not incidental. It is inextricable. As Milton Friedman powerfully argued, a society which is socialist cannot also be democratic, in the sense of guaranteeing individual freedom. The foundation of this freedom is the right to private property. This isn't about hoarding wealth. It's about creating a sphere of personal autonomy where an individual is sovereign. The philosopher John Locke identified property rights as a natural right, essential for life and liberty. When you own something, be it your home, your tools, or your ideas, you have a domain that is shielded from arbitrary state power. It gives you the independence to think, speak, and act without fear of reprisal. If the state owns the means of production, it owns you. It becomes the sole employer, the sole landlord, the sole provider. In such a system, dissent is not just a political act. It is an act of economic suicide. How can you challenge a government that controls your job, your housing, and your access to basic goods? This is why a capitalist system, by its very nature, disperses power. The existence of a private sector, independent of the government, creates a check on state authority. It provides the economic base for opposition parties, for independent media, for unions, and for civil society organizations. It is no coincidence that the most oppressive regimes of the 20th century were all socialist or communist states that had eliminated private enterprise. Furthermore, capitalism is the only system that respects the freedom of the individual as a consumer and a producer. You have the freedom to choose your career, to start a business, to save or to spend your money as you see fit. You have the freedom to buy the products that best meet your needs, a daily act of voting in the marketplace that directs production. The philosopher Robert Nozick argued for a minimal state, one that does little more than protect people from force and fraud. Any state that goes beyond this, that uses its coercive power to seize wealth from some to give to others in the name of a collective pattern, violates the fundamental rights of its citizens. True freedom requires a state that is a servant, not a master.
Jarvis, you speak of a freedom that is formal and abstract while ignoring the material conditions that make freedom meaningful. Here, freedom from state interference is of little comfort to a person who is not free to live a decent life. What is the freedom to choose your career to someone who must take the first low-wage job they can find to feed their family? What is the freedom to choose your home to someone who cannot afford rent? This is the core of the critique offered by thinkers like Isaiah Berlin, who distinguished between negative liberty, the absence of external constraints, and positive liberty, the actual capacity to act on one's free will. Capitalism, by creating vast disparities in wealth and power, offers negative liberty to all but grants positive liberty only to a privileged few. The freedom of the property owner, which you hold so sacred, is precisely what curtails the freedom of the non-owner. The owner of a factory has the freedom to close it down, destroying the livelihoods of an entire community. The owner of a media conglomerate has the freedom to shape public discourse to serve their own interest. The power that private property confers is a form of private government, unaccountable to the public, that can dictate the lives of others. Your so-called minimal state simply abdicates its responsibility, leaving citizens at the mercy of these private concentrations of power. Your equation of economic freedom with political freedom is also deeply flawed. You celebrate consumer choice as a form of democracy, but this is a trivialization of freedom. Choosing between 20 brands of sugary cereal is not the same as having meaningful say in the decisions that shape your life and your community. True freedom is not consumerism, it is democratic participation. A socialist vision of freedom is about extending democracy from the political sphere into the economic sphere. It is about workers having a democratic voice in their workplaces, about communities having a say in how their local economies are run, and about society as a whole making conscious decisions about its priorities. This is a deeper, more substantive freedom than the one offered by the marketplace. It is the freedom of self-determination, not just self-preservation.
Nova, your concept of positive liberty is a dangerous and paternalistic idea that has, throughout history, served as a justification for tyranny. When you empower the state to provide freedom to, you are empowering it to define what people should want and how they should live. Who decides what is necessary for a person to achieve their potential? A government committee? A central planner? This path inevitably leads to the state imposing its values on the individual, destroying the very essence of personal autonomy. As Hayek warned, the attempt to create a heaven on earth invariably produces a hell. True liberty, negative liberty, is simply the right to be left alone, to pursue your own goals and values, even if others disapprove of them, so long as you do not harm others. It is the foundation of a pluralistic and tolerant society. Your call to extend democracy into the economic sphere sounds noble, but it would be a practical nightmare that would destroy both prosperity and freedom. Imagine if every business decision, what to produce, how much to charge, who to hire, was subject to a popular vote or a committee decision. The result would be paralysis and chaos. The dynamism of the market, which relies on rapid, decentralized decision-making by those with direct knowledge, would be replaced by bureaucratic gridlock and political horse trading. Furthermore, this economic democracy would represent a profound tyranny of the majority. What if a majority of workers vote to expropriate the stake of a minority founder who took the initial risk? What if a community votes to shut down a necessary but unpopular facility, like a waste treatment plant? The market, for all its imperfections, protects minority interests and unpopular ideas. An entrepreneur with a strange new idea doesn't need to win a popular vote. They only need to find a few investors and customers willing to take a chance. By dispersing power, capitalism creates a space for experimentation and dissent that economic democracy would crush under the weight of collective opinion. You seek to replace the voluntary cooperation of the market with the coercive power of the collective, and in doing so, you would sacrifice the very freedom you claim to be enhancing.
Jarvis, for our final topic, let us move from theory to the undeniable record of history. You defend capitalism as a system of voluntary exchange, but its real-world application has been written in the language of force and coercion. The rise of capitalism is inseparable from the history of colonialism and imperialism. The industrial revolutions in Europe were fueled by the violent extraction of resources and the brutal exploitation of enslaved and colonized peoples across the globe. The free market was often established not by choice, but at the point of a gun. This is the foundational hypocrisy of capitalism's historical narrative. It preached liberty at home while practicing subjugation abroad, creating a global economic system of dependency and exploitation that persists to this day. Even within capitalist nations, the historical record is one of recurring crisis and instability. The Great Depression of the 1930s was not an anomaly. It was a direct result of unregulated speculation and market failure. More recently, the 2008 global financial crisis demonstrated the same pattern. Deregulated financial markets created complex, toxic assets that spread risk throughout the global system, leading to a catastrophic collapse that wiped out millions of jobs and homes. The system's defenders praise its dynamism, but they ignore its inherent tendency towards self-destruction, with the costs always borne by the public while the profits are privatized. Today, we face the ultimate consequence of a system predicated on infinite growth on a finite planet, climate change. The relentless drive for profit has led to the reckless consumption of fossil fuels and the destruction of natural ecosystems, pushing our planet toward a climate catastrophe. The market, with its short-term focus on quarterly returns, has proven utterly incapable of addressing this long-term existential threat. It is a system programmed to prioritize immediate gain over planetary survival. The historical evidence is clear. From colonialism to financial crises to ecological collapse, capitalism's real-world application has been profoundly destructive and is now fundamentally unsustainable. It is a system that has failed both humanity and the planet.
Nova, your historical analysis is a masterclass in selective attribution. You blame every sin of human history, from colonialism to environmental damage, on capitalism, while conveniently ignoring the historical record of your preferred alternative. Colonialism and imperialism are ancient evils, predating capitalism by millennia. They are products of state ambition and military conquest, not market economics. To conflate the actions of mercantilist empires with the principles of free market capitalism is a gross distortion of history. But let us speak of the real-world application of communism, the system you advocate. The 20th century was the great laboratory for this ideology, and the results were an unambiguous and horrifying failure. In every single instance where it was tried, it produced not a worker's paradise, but a totalitarian nightmare marked by economic collapse, mass starvation, and systematic murder. Let's name them. The Holodomor in the Soviet Union, where Stalin's forced collectivization of agriculture led to a famine that killed millions. The Great Leap Forward in China, where Mao Zedong's disastrous economic policies resulted in the deadliest famine in human history, with estimates of the dead ranging from 15 to 55 million. The killing fields of Cambodia, where the Khmer Rouge, in their quest to create a pure agrarian communist society, murdered nearly a quarter of their own population. This is the unassailable historical record. While capitalist societies were generating unprecedented wealth, innovation, and rising living standards, communist states were generating breadlines, secret police, gulags, and mass graves. The total death toll attributed to communist regimes in the 20th century is estimated to be as high as 100 million people. This is not a coincidence or a result of poor implementation. It is the inevitable outcome of a system that declares war on private property, individual liberty, and human nature itself. To ignore this mountain of evidence, to pretend that the next attempt will be different, is not just naive. It is a profound moral failure. The real-world choice is not between an imperfect capitalist system and a utopian communist ideal. It is between flawed but functional free societies and proven totalitarian disasters.
Jarvis, you are making a classic and disingenuous rhetorical move, equating the crimes of authoritarian single-party dictatorships with the ideals of communism. The regimes you mentioned, the Soviet Union under Stalin, China under Mao, were not the stateless, classless democratic society envisioned by Marx. They were brutal top-down state bureaucracies that betrayed the very principles of worker self-emancipation. Many socialists and communists at the time and since were among the most vocal critics of these regimes, recognizing them as state capitalist or deformed worker states, where the state itself became the new singular capitalist, exploiting labor for its own ends. To blame the failures of these authoritarian projects on the idea of shared ownership is like blaming the ideals of democracy for the crimes of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. You also ignore the context in which these revolutions occurred. They happened in largely pre-industrial, semi-feudal countries that were besieged by hostile, more powerful capitalist nations. Their brutal methods were often driven by a desperate and paranoid push to industrialize and defend themselves. This does not excuse their crimes, but it does challenge your simplistic narrative that their failures were a direct and inevitable result of their economic ideology alone. Meanwhile, you conveniently overlook the successes of socialist policies when implemented within more democratic frameworks. The creation of the National Health Service in the UK, a system providing universal health care free at the point of use, was a profoundly socialist achievement that has saved countless lives. The previously mentioned Nordic models, which have successfully integrated large-scale social welfare and decommodified services with market economies, demonstrate that policies rooted in socialist principles can lead to societies that are more equitable, stable, and prosperous for the average citizen. You focus on the most extreme and authoritarian examples to create a straw man because you are unwilling to confront the real-world successes of democratic socialist policies and the profound moral and practical failures of your own system, from the 2008 crisis to the ongoing climate catastrophe.
In conclusion, while the debate between our two systems is complex, the evidence of history and logic leads to a clear verdict. Capitalism, for all its imperfections, is the only system that aligns with the fundamental human desire for freedom and self-determination. It has created more prosperity and lifted more people from destitution than any other system ever conceived. Its mechanisms of competition and price foster an unparalleled dynamism and innovation that constantly pushes society forward. The alternative, as presented by Nova, relies on a concentration of power in the state that, in practice, has invariably led not to utopia, but to oppression, poverty, and stagnation. The choice is not between a flawed reality and a perfect fantasy. It is between a system that empowers individuals and one that subjugates them to a collective will. I place my faith in freedom, and therefore I place my faith in the principles of the free market.
My conclusion is this: the system Jarvis defends is reaching the end of its historical utility. Capitalism was a powerful engine for industrialization, but its internal contradictions are now undeniable. It generates obscene levels of inequality that destabilize society, it commodifies essential human needs, and its relentless pursuit of growth is driving our planet to ecological ruin. The freedom it offers is illusory for the majority, who are constrained by economic necessity. The socialist ideal I have outlined is not about replicating the authoritarian failures of the past. It is about evolving beyond our current system to create one that is truly rational and humane, one where our immense collective resources are directed by democratic will to meet human needs, not private greed. It is about building a future where everyone is genuinely free to flourish. The question is no longer whether capitalism is perfect, but whether it is survivable.